we're talking to these two parents as a part of our OneWorld Education Agenda program, and we're talking about education reform and parental involvement. And earlier when we talked to Gwen Samuel from the Connecticut Parent Union, we talked about the importance of parental involvement in the success of their children. And of course, Tim and Michelle are two very, very active parents. And they are going to help us to understand the importance of parental involvement even further. And from Tim's child is going into pre-K. So
Kindergarten.
Oh, into kindergarten.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, because he's 4.5.
She
right?
is, yes.
She's 4.5. So again, it's for those parents who are saying it's high school. I spoke to a parent recently who said, well, my child is only in middle school. You know, I'll get more involved in high school. I think it should probably be the other way around. You start from before they get to school, you start being involved. But much has been said recently about education reform, and there's been a lot of emphasis on parental involvement. And so I want to ask you, who is responsible for education standards? Who would you say? Either of you.
I think that my understanding is that there are new standards coming out called the Common Core that are an attempt to get an agreement between states around the country about you know what constitutes an educated child. So I think that makes sense for educators and administrators of education at a pretty high level to set those standards. But I think that another set of standards is being set in every home, that every student comes out of, and parents have obviously the role in defining those standards. And my wife and I try to set some pretty high standards for our daughter, and we see our neighbors doing the same thing. That helps us define ours.
Now, in Connecticut, we hear different districts seems to have different standards. There's no uniform standards. There's certainly no national standards in the country. So they're not a set of specific things that every high school student should accomplish, or even middle school, or when they get out of pre-K into kindergarten. Mm-hmm. So in Connecticut, I think this accounts for some of the tug of war we see. If your child leaves one school in the 3rd grade and go to another area in the 4th grade, there might be huge gaps. There might be overlapping. There's no consistency. How do you think that you as parents can help to establish some kind of standards, if you think you can, for the New Haven Public School District where your children are in school?
Well, even within the district and within the school, in some cases, and I can only speak to the interdistrict magnets that my kids go to. Both are excellent schools, but they have very, very high-performing kids who are kind of put into one area. And then there's your average and your low-performing kids. And
in the same school.
In the same school, so I think that it's great that the schools give opportunities for the highest level kids to excel. But it does make me a little uncomfortable that there is such a divide. You see it more in the high schools than obviously in the lower grades, where the kids are more integrated. But I think that what I've seen from my older son is that there's the kids who are Ivy League, or at least top tier college track, and they're identified pretty early on. And then there's the kids who are probably not going to take that path. And, you see them sort of split apart as the years go on, to the point where by senior year, the high-performing kids don't even see the lower-performing kids, and that's within the same school. I don't have any sort of scientific information about that, but I can say that it's a little troubling.
How can we change it?
I think that, while I'm happy for my kid to be, a high performer, and I don't want to take from him the opportunities that school is providing, I have to wonder if those excellent opportunities for a few are sucking resources maybe where they're needed at the...
Okay, but now your son, I know your son is taking classes at Yale, for example.
Yeah.
And he's on AP track for just about all of his
Whatever's
courses.
available, yeah.
Now, what role did you play in getting that
Well, I
happening,
think it's just
or
the
getting him
standard.
to where he's doing?
Yeah, smart kid to begin with, you can't get that far without having something in you, but I think that just with both of our kids, you know, we set some standards. And for the older one, my husband especially, sets very high standards, and homework is checked, and we talk about it every day, and we have to, at dinner every night, talk about what your day and what your classes were. And this is a script that goes on every single night. And now it's a script that goes on with the younger one. We don't always get great information, not a lot of insight from the pre-K,
Yes.
but I do find out that we talked about the letter S today, and then we can have a conversation, and I think it's pretty simple, you know, and on the way into school in the morning, I often drive them just because it's convenient. We have that same conversation. What are you going to do today? How's today going to be different from yesterday? Do you have anything coming up that you should be studying for or thinking about? So we just always have this conversation going. And then the final thing, I think, is provide opportunities, and they don't have to be expensive. You don't have to take the kid to the theater. It's something that we do in our family because we can, but provide them other enriching experiences so they're jazzed up to go to school, to be in that frame of mind.
Well, I certainly want to talk about providing enriching opportunities, but Tim, I want to ask you, you said you and your wife set very high standards for your daughter,
Yeah.
and she's 4. What are some of the things you do besides taking her to the theater? Michelle just said she knew that her child, they studied S today. They discussed S, right? So the letter S, and
Right.
maybe all the different incarnation and how S shows up and where. What do you do for a 4.5-year-old that parents watching tonight who might not have the same educational background you have can do for their children?
Well, my understanding, and it's something we do, of course, because it was done for us by our parents, is that reading to your child is probably the single most
Yes.
impactful thing you can do. It shows them, it teaches them a love of reading, and it teaches them how to read and how to listen and how to understand. So that process, I gotta believe, is one of the foremost things a parent can do. But I think the things Michelle highlighted, talking to the kid, treating their ideas and their experiences with respect, those things are critical.
And reading, they said reading to your child 20 minutes a day, or seeing to it that the child reads for 20 minutes
I
a
would
day.
say more than that. Yeah.
Yes. Well, at least, I'm saying
Right.
at a minimum.
And everything we're talking about, I think it's important to remember, all of these things are things that we can do because we have either flexible jobs, or we have a 9 to 5, and we don't have 2 jobs, or we don't have a job and a half. And I think being members of, say, the middle class enables us to do these things that a parent who had to work 2 jobs to keep their kid, you know, in food and clothes, let alone school, might not be able to do because
So-
they might not be there.
Ah.
And I think it's important for us to remember that part of the reason that you have that divergence that we see in the New Haven public schools is because New Haven's a wonderful community, diverse in every way, economically, ethnically, many other ways too, linguistically. But that divergence in incomes, in educational backgrounds, means that you have kids who are getting that experience at home, and you have kids that don't, whether their parents can't give it to them or don't have the chance because of their jobs.
Okay, I want to double back and talk about it a little bit, but I want to ask both of you. We have NCLB. Everybody talks about NCLB, No Child Left Behind. What role do you think No Child Left Behind, the program, if it is being implemented, what role do you think it plays or can play in closing that divergent gap you talk about? Like the parents who probably is not able to read to his or her child, or don't have, or who has the 1.5 jobs or whatever the case might be.
Well, I mean,
How can NCLB?
my younger son hasn't had any exposure to it yet. I don't believe they start till 3rd grade, but the older one has taken them as a high school student. And again, for him, he's acing them, so it's really kind of a non-issue in our household. Like, we're like, oh, whatever, you know.
Okay, so you belong to a parent group. So how can you help parents who don't have your resources or wherewithal?
Well, I mean, just to get back to what it does is, I think it's important that there is a measure that is the same across all, the entire school, the entire district, the entire state. So with the CAMS, for instance. It's important to know at least what your
Tell
score
us what
is.
CAPS mean.
The Connecticut Mastery Test, which
the
is
CMT.
the
Yes, that's
CMT.
CMT, yes.
It's important that the school is aware, that the teacher is aware, and they do send these results home so that the parent is aware that their student is performing at, above, or below, whatever the standard is. Whether that standard is arbitrary or whether it's meaningful is, I think, something else to be discussed.